In this video, we're going to see how to troubleshoot HANA authorization related issues, HANA privilege related issues using a SQL script procedure. Now, this procedure that we have, which SAP introduced with HANA Support Pack 4, is a simplified method of troubleshooting privileges and authorization issues in HANA. The procedure is used to determine which privilege a user is missing when he or she gets an insufficient privilege error message. Now, in a way, you can consider this procedure get underscore insufficient underscore privilege underscore user error underscore details. This procedure, you can compare that to be similar with like SU53. Okay, so like in SAP, right, you have a couple of main ways of troubleshooting. You either, when user gets an authorization error, you ask them to execute SU53, or you go and use tracing, st.trace or st01, right? Similarly, till before Support Pack 4 in HANA, for troubleshooting privilege-related issues, authorization-related issues, you could activate a user-specific trace to see what privileges were missing for a user. But with Support Pack 4, SAP introduced a privilege or procedure, get underscore insufficient underscore privilege underscore error underscore details, to simplify troubleshooting and analyzing authorization privileges issues. Okay, so HANA 2.0 Support Pack 4, that's when this procedure was introduced. Now, when the user gets an error, okay, now if the customer, your system is on Support Pack 4 or over Support Pack 4, when somebody is lacking privileges to do something, the user will get insufficient privilege. Detailed info for this error can be found with GUI ID and a GUI ID code. Okay, so you need to take that code, the GUI ID code, and use that in this procedure to analyze what privileges are missing. Now, in this case, like in SU53, if you get the information that you need in SU53, right, you don't need to trace it. Similarly, this procedure will give you the missing information as to what the user is missing, right? So in that case, there is no need for activating user-specific trace to troubleshoot the issue. Now, one thing that is a mandatory thing is that the user, the person who's going to troubleshoot, who's going to execute or use this procedure for troubleshooting, that user should have access to this procedure himself with execute privilege. Okay, and the syntax for calling the procedure is call sys dot, then the get insufficient privilege underscore error details, that procedure name, open parenthesis, then you give the GUI ID that will be given to you by the user, or you can ask the user, like you ask the user to send you the SU53 screenshot, you can ask the user to give you the GUI ID. Okay, good. And then followed comma, then followed by question mark, and then closing parenthesis. Now we're going to use this and see how to read the data that this particular procedure shows you. Okay, so we'll look at some examples doing that. So get insufficient privilege error underscore details. This procedure is a simplified method of troubleshooting privileges related issues. Now let us go to the system, and in Web IDE, I'm going to use the Web IDE in our example. Let us try to create a user ID and then assign a couple of privileges and objects to see if we are able to do it. The user ID that I'm using is SecAdmin. Okay, so let's say I give a user ID, say test user. Okay, and I'm going to give a password. And let's say I go to system privilege and I'm going to add, let's say, catalog read as a privilege. Now I'm going to save this. Okay, for now. This is the first scenario. Let's save this. The password is not the same. Okay, let's save this. And before I do that, let's clear the console and now save this. And if you see, I get an error here. What is the error? Error in granting system privilege. Catalog read failed. Insufficient privilege. Detailed info for this error can be found with GUID. This GUID. So let's assume the user gets an error like this. And he informs you because you are the security person. The user will inform you that you got this error. So like you ask the user in SAP, you to send you the SU53 screenshot. Similarly in Hana, for troubleshooting Hana issues, you ask the user to give you this GUID. Okay, so you take that GUID, go to Hana Studio, and open the SQL console. Okay, and this is the syntax for the procedure. So you type call So the syntax for executing the procedure is call sys schema dot the procedure name get underscore insufficient underscore privilege underscore error underscore details followed by open parenthesis and then single quotes. You would copy paste the GUID that the user gives you, comma, and then put a question mark and close it, or the parenthesis, right? Now let's go and execute this. So I executed it, and a new tab, the results tab will open up for you. Okay. Now if you read, let's read how to read this data that you are getting. Okay. So the first column that you have is GUID, right? Then create time, the connection ID, session username. Session user meaning the user who got the error. Okay. Check username. Okay, the same. It's a session username and check username, they're same. Which was the privilege for which the issue happened, right? The lack of insufficient privileges error came up for. You have the privilege name in this case. Okay. What is missing? So for this user, the checked username, right? What is missing? So for SecAdmin, for catalog read privilege, right? Missing grant option. So SecAdmin is missing grant to others option on this privilege. Okay, now let's go and take a look at the user. SecAdmin, let's go to privileges, system privileges, and let's see catalog read, right? The user has, SecAdmin has access to catalog read, but what is missing for him, for that user ID, is missing grant option, right? So if you look for catalog read, here on the right side, grantable to others user and roles, it is not checked, which means even though the user has access to catalog read, he cannot grant it to others. So that is what SecAdmin was trying to do. So SecAdmin was trying to grant catalog read to a new user. Okay, but we couldn't do it because the user ID does not have grantable to other users and roles, privilege. So let's select that and save. Okay, so it's saved now. Now let's go and check. Okay, I'm going to clear this console, and now let's go and check if I'm able to save it again. Okay. See, now the user ID has been saved. Okay, so this is how you troubleshoot, privilege related issues, authorization related issues using the SQL procedure. Now let us go to object privilege, okay, and try to add, let's say, a procedure for some catalog object, some object to this user ID. Okay, now let's go and do this. Okay, I'm going to say grant. Okay, and I'm going to use the activated role, for example. I'll say okay. And I'm going to save this again. Okay, I'm going to save now. Okay, and save. See, I again got a insufficient privilege error message, and then I also got a GUI ID here. GUI ID here, right? So again, take this. Take the GUID, ask the user to give you the GUID, and then go back to SQL console. And now you can use the same call statement. And now let me replace the GUID here. And I'm going to use this. Let me clear this up also. Okay. Now let's see what do we get here, right? So let's try to read this output. So again, you are the GUID, the session user, the checked user, the user ID who got the error. What is him missing? He's missing privilege execute. Okay, with grantable to others. Who is missing this access? User ID SecAdmin. What is the missing? Execute privilege to grant it to others on what object? Okay, so if you scroll to the right, okay, you have the object name grant activated role, right? That's what we were trying to give access to. Okay, and that is a store procedure function. Okay, now let's go to the user ID and see if the user has that privilege, that procedure assigned to the user ID, right? So what was it? We had grant activated role. Okay, so let's go and check grant activated role. And if you see here, The user has access to the grant activated role procedure with execute privilege, but does not have privileges to grant it to others. Okay, so let's go and grant it to others and save. Okay, now let's go and try to save this now. Let's go and try to assign it again. Grant activated role. Okay, say OK and say execute. And let me save. So test user was saved. Okay. Let's take one more scenario, right? Let's go and assign a procedure, say revoke. Okay. So revoke activated rule. I'm going to, again, I'm going to clean this up and I'm going to save this. Again, I get an insufficient privilege error message, right? So you get the GUID. So anytime, if some user is complaining, keep in mind, see if in the error the user gets, there is a GUID. Okay, so if there is a GUID, ask for it. And then you can use that GUID in this for this store procedure in the call. So I'm going to put it here in this case. Right, I'm going to clean this up, clear it, and now let's go and execute this now. Okay. So the checked user is SecAdmin, right? What is the privilege missing? Execute. Grant option is missing. Again, the procedure, the object name is revoke activated role. What is the object name? It's a procedure or a function. Okay, now the problem here is, let's go and check. The user does not have, the user ID does not have the revoke privileges at all. So he cannot grant, okay, so the privilege. So unless this user ID SecAdmin gets the appropriate privileges on the objects, that user ID cannot be used to grant such privileges, such objects. Okay, so if I go and assign or grant access to that missing object, okay, so revoke activated role, and I put execute and grantable to others and save this. Okay, and now if I go and save here and clear this, now if I go and add it, save, is succeeded. Okay, now there's one more thing that you need to know. So when you see the output of that procedure, right, the call, the get insufficient error details procedure, sometimes if the you will get the schema name here, okay, but you won't get the object names. So which means the user is missing some privileges, whatever is shown here, on the schema itself. If under a schema, if you have a table or a view that is missing some privileges, then you would have the object name under the object name column along with the schema name. Okay, but if there is privileges are missing on the schema itself, then you won't have anything under object name and object type, meaning object name. Here you would have schema. The object type would be schema, and you will have this. So you will have the schema name here. Okay, that could also happen. So to simply troubleshoot, or the simplified way of troubleshooting HANA related issues is using get underscore insufficient underscore privilege underscore error underscore details procedure. Now you can troubleshoot using tracing also. Okay, you will get the same information that you see here. But that's a longer method. This is a much simplified way of doing it, because looking at trace file, and depending on how long you're doing an activity, what is getting traced, you'll have to read through the log to see, to get to the correct information that you need. But this is a much simpler way of doing this. It's like I said earlier, it's kind of like SU53 for you.